Morning, everyone, and welcome to our session, The Fine Art of Documentation, Ancient Gem Photography Reimagined. Thank you all for joining us in person or virtually. It is a pleasure to be presenting today alongside Tahnee and among these other very talented presenters. My name is Niki Nakagawa, and I'm a photographer within the Getty Digital Imaging Department at the Villa. I specialize in our macro photography set, which includes anything small, gems, jewelry, coins, lamellas, and more.
Good morning. I'm Tahnee Louise Cracchiola, Imaging Manager at the Getty Villa. I specialize in photographing outdoor sculpture, architecture, and gardens, as well as three-dimensional objects. I work and train the crew on set building and lighting for various materials.
J. Paul Getty's dream of building an ancient villa came to fruition in 1974, when black and white analog film was the finest medium available to document this grand site. Today, well into the 21st century, with access to the most innovative digital technologies at our fingertips, we have the opportunity to showcase our collection in a way that is beyond Getty's wildest dreams. Working as photographers at the Getty Villa allows us exclusive access not only to this gorgeous location, but also some of the most beautiful and renowned pieces of Greek and Roman art in the world.
Today, Niki and I will take you on a journey into one of the most intricate materials in our collection, ancient gems. This presentation is a continuation of our series, The Fine Art of Documentation, that was first presented in 2019 in partnership with Kevin Canlan from the Asian Art Museum. So let's begin as we did before. Every object has a story.
And we are the storytellers.
Zeus, larger than life, sits at the top of Mount Olympus, watching over those large and small. This grandiose marble statue, bathed in sunlight, is positioned in the center of one of our largest galleries. Depictions of gods and goddesses surround him, immortalized in stone and metal. These continue to be the very objects you would envision in the halls and gardens of an ancient Grecian villa.
It is our charge as image makers to photograph objects large and small.
And sometimes we get an up close and personal relationship in these objects, and sometimes find our ancient doppelgangers.
Our talk today steps away from the grandiose and is centered around worlds carved into small packages, the Getty Villa's engraved gem collection. Through close collaboration with Getty Villa curator Kenneth Lapotin, I am continually intrigued by the stories behind gems in antiquity. Cameos, intaglios, and jewelry carved from semi-precious stones were worn on the body or casually held in the hand, and were considered some of the most valuable items to ancient inhabitants. They were coined portable art and were readily used to spread artistic expression across the ancient world. Depending on its subject matter, these objects could reflect personal opinion, political stance, or class stature. These gems are meant to be held up to the light and rotated to truly admire and show off their craftsmanship and beauty. Some of these gems are no bigger than your pinky nail, and yet its engravings tell extensive stories of war, love, vanity, philosophy, and normal everyday routines, like giving your pet their favorite treat.
So here's a look at our old display of gems in the gallery. And unfortunately, because of the sheer size of these gems and how difficult they are to light properly in a case, they are often overlooked in a museum setting due to the lack of accessibility for visitors to get close enough.
So our first challenge is the visual experience. How do we as photographers create a visual experience for our visitors and viewers through imagery? And how do we capture the interest of viewers who do not have the same in-depth experience as we do? Well, through a massive reinstall and reimagination of the collection that traces the evolution of styles, iconography, and technology throughout antiquity. In the spring of 2018, the Getty Villa underwent a complete renovation of its gallery spaces. This included a full rearrangement of objects, categorized in chronological order, as well as technology updates throughout both floors of the museum.
From the experience of the reinstallation of the Villa collection in 2018, I learned a way of lighting gems through Niki's vision of all things small, so specifically the tiny engraved gems in our collection.
The most ambitious update was the introduction of 12 digital labels for small objects, an innovation that was most notably used and launched by the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. The traditional paper labels were redesigned as digital labels, accessed on an iPad and outfitted with software developed by third-party developer Guidekick and the Getty's interpretive content team. This style of interaction allows the visitor a visual experience never used before at the Getty.
So not only are digital labels a clean, updated way of providing in-depth historical information of the object, but also allow visitors to do a deep dive into each individual object for an up-close experience. See multiple views of each object, including its impression molds, and examine the details of these tiny objects in a way that cannot be done with the human eye alone.
For perspective, this beautiful intaglio amethyst, depicting statesman and orator Demosthenes and signed by artist Dioscordes, measures a mere 2 by 1.4 centimeters and was carved roughly around 25 BCE. Tiny, ancient, and very difficult to light.
And these reimagined displays of gems solved our first challenge. Yet we are confronted with the obvious. Quality of imagery from years ago of 4x5 transparency scans that clearly would not hold up under this new technology. So if we're to bust a move and break into this new vision, our imagery needed to follow suit.
So the second challenge we needed to address: how do we know what the stakeholders' needs are? We call this process the 3 C's.
So communication, collaboration, and continuity are the 3 vital components that need to be addressed within our workflows. There was a time in our practice where we worked in silos. Photographers didn't want to have the interaction with their curators because of time and vision. There were issues with wanting to get the work in and get it out. And those times have changed. And why? Because our curators, conservators, and designers are the stakeholders in what we produce. And the result of what we photograph is to meet their needs.
So whether these images end up in a publication, a banner, or in a gift shop coffee cup, our goal is to create beautiful imagery that aligned with lighting we use for other objects and would suit the different needs of our stakeholders.
So by incorporating these 3 C's, we're not only establish a higher standard for photography, but we also nurture a camaraderie and sense of shared consideration throughout the museum.
This new workflow launched our third and most innovative challenge:
new improved lighting.
In the past, gems at the Getty were photographed using multiple continuous pinpointed lights. Although effective for some gems, the light quality was not suitable for all gems, and the engravings tend to go flat due to the multiple directional light sources and would create multiple directional highlights, especially on rounded or beveled gems. Our goal was to recreate a lighting scenario to showcase each gem's intricacies in a beautiful manner, as well as document the surface textures, translucency or opacity, and accurate color that would be enhanced by the new digital displays when the public drills to a macro level.
So look, here's a look at the evolution of our older sets. We've come a long way, as you can tell. It's a little bit of chaos here. You can see that the traditional 6 pico light setup with 2 reflectors on each side. You can imagine how many times I got burned trying to slide myself to the gem set here. So because of the multiple burns, I decided to move toward the fiber optic system that was used to light our display cases in the galleries. It was a beast, and then a lot, I felt like I had a lot of control, but the constant light was not the answer for the focus stacking. So as you can see, it was time for us to reinvent the wheel and dust off all of our lighting shapers from the equipment closet that we've got there in the studio and go in a different direction. And this is about when Niki came onto the scene at the Getty.
So here's the first version of my gem setup. I started with the classic one light with diffusion and continued to redesign the lighting style for our gems as the reinstall was now fast approaching at this time. This is when our new gem set was born, and it was back to the basics and our new motto, keep it simple.
So back in the early years, legacy photography of the gem collection was captured on film, and scanning these negatives proved not to be the best solution for the digital displays. So even when the Villa Studios moved into digital photography, these early digital files were still quite small at lower resolutions and did not have the capability of zooming in. So, like at 100% without visible grain.
Therefore, we embarked on rephotographing the gem collection for display, which led to a total revamp of our lighting style. Demonstrated here is a comparison between the same gem photographed first in 1996 and then again in 2018. The reinstallation offered the Villa Photo Studio the unique opportunity to reinvent and update our lighting style for gems and combine the various needs across the museum to support new branding guidelines. This includes images that would be suitable for the needs of curators, scholars, conservation, design, and publication.
And continuity of dynamic fine art lighting styles and workflow are essential to a cohesive, clean look that is imperative to creating this new Getty style. So regardless of shape and style of the gem, using a standard background for each image pulls the collection together, creating a cohesive look where the object itself is center stage.
So after seeing the different types of gems that come through our studio and communicating with curators and conservation, we now have a standard set of views for each gem type.
So with this type in mind, and with the needs of our stakeholders communicated and solidified, we began to reinvent our gem photography workflow.
So this next example is a great study of how our lighting techniques evolved. In 2017, before the reinstallation, the Getty acquired this cornelian intaglio gem depicting Venus and Anchises set in a modern gold setting. This was right on the cusp of perfecting our new lighting techniques to update the Getty brand. My first encounter photographing this gem was to light with our older lighting style, as you see here. The highlights are a bit jarring and they take away from the overall look and the mood of the figures, which also disrupts the smoothness of the engraving itself. So in 2021, I had the opportunity to reshoot this gem using our newer lighting style.
So aren't they lovely? It really is a beautiful transition to see the difference between the old and the new.
So the newer photography reveals a better look of the engraving and is an overall better representation of the object. The key to rephotographing these objects is, again, to keep things simple. The set for gems is now on a motorized copy stand fitted with the glass tabletop. The current equipment on this set is the Phase 1 XF with the IQ4 back and the 120mm macro lens.
And the 150 megapixel digital back allows a higher resolution crop to these tiny objects. And this set allows a 360 degrees of lighting access to the gem on set. And one main light leads the way with reflector cars above and below to accent color and shape.
So now let's just dive right into my workflow. So when the gem first arrives on set, I perform this very short discovery phase, which is a 5-minute inspection of the gem and how it reacts to those different light sources. So here you can see the gem was placed on set with the light source skimming the object with no diffusion added. This kind of helps me find the sweet spot for where the light needs to come from to best reveal that engraving. And it's especially important for me to make sure I identify areas that curators point out to me as important to the piece. Then I start to place my diffusion around the object. Once that diffusion is placed, you can really see the difference in the quality of light and how that light really begins to fill in those engraved areas. I also inspect the clarity and translucency of the stone, and I do that by powering up my background light. The brighter the background is, the more translucent the gem is, the more washed out that engraving is going to look. So for this gem, although my background light is a little strong, there are differences within the gem itself in the color. And that's something that I do want to showcase, but maybe in a more subtle way that doesn't take away from the engraving. So I use just one main light source. It's usually a broncolor pico. And this light acts as my sun and lights the main areas of the engraving. So here I'm using a very flexible piece of vellum, and I'll use different types of modifiers depending on the gem. And this helps me carve the light and push shadow into areas to increase that dimensionality. The type of modifier really does depend on the gem, and I'll just cycle through those modifiers to see what works best. So you'll see my diffusion moving around the object now. The closer that light source is to the gem, you'll see that the highlight is really spreading into those engraved areas, and it really makes that engraving pop off the piece. And then here, just adding a little bit more diffusion to finish out the figures and see where I need to put that light. So here is my close to final shot using the Fulba diffusion cone as my modifier. That is what I figured to be best for the gem itself. You'll see that the cone works really beautifully for the engraving. I can get really strong, bright, defined highlights all throughout the engraving, but unfortunately, it's not best for the setting. The gold just goes really, really flat. So I'll sometimes bring in a ring light for particularly round gems with really deep engravings, so I can get the light directly above the gem and get that light source into those engravings. But for this object, the ring light obviously does not work super well for the gem. It creates really strange highlights, but it does really beautiful things for the gold setting compared to the diffuse light. So I'll just note this shot for later use. So because of the two engraved figures facing in opposite directions and the gold setting, I can't really capture this shot in one capture. So if I can't get that lighting all in one shot, we'll meticulously plan a series of different lighting patterns to bring out certain areas of the gem and then send them off to our post team to bring them all together in post. So in the image shown here, I shot my focus stack for the overall gem exposure, a support shot for the woman's face and form, a support shot for the man's torso and stronger details within the scene, and the support shot for the gold setting using the ring light. So this allows us to get as much detail as possible from the engraving and the ability to give each material, in this case, the gem and the gold setting, its proper lighting. Using the autofocus stacking feature on the Phase XF camera systems made this a much easier task to undertake. We all know the pain of manually focus stacking. At the Getty, we use Helicon Focus to automatically stack our series. This gem had a small stack of 5 images because it is a bit larger and much flatter than most of the gems I shoot. But for most gems, these stacks range between 15 to 40 images. So from here, I'll send all the files to post to get final treatment.
So speaking of post, the life of this gem continues and the final captures are passed to our production crew. And here specifically is Ben Goddard, imaging technician specialist. And thanks, to our extremely talented post-production team, we no longer have the same hurdles that our film photography predecessors experienced.
So for the reinstall, I worked very closely with Ben, who color corrected each gem, created and replaced all backgrounds with our new standard gem background, masked multiple views of each object, and prepared files for archival purposes and the digital displays.
So you can see it was a colossal undertaking of multiple views of each gem. And I just wanted to just real quick go through to celebrate this work because it was just a really fantastic opportunity to reestablish standards and start a new way of thinking and photographing these objects. And you can just see the beauty of basically, Niki's talent of how she pulled together the light and understood these objects. It really is a lot of work, and it's fun to see it all together here as we look through it of just what it takes to photograph a collection like this. So the final result, the digital labels in the gallery, right? That's what we were all pushing for to showcase this work out to the public. So the following slides are a sneak peek at what you all see during the tour at the Getty Villa tomorrow of multiple shadow boxes displayed throughout the museum with our newly designed digital labels. So here's a quick look. So when you're there tomorrow, take a peek, get out there and get your hands on these iPads and get an up close and personal view of these objects. They really are fascinating to see so up close and personal. And it's exciting, what we're able to accomplish now with the equipment that we have at our fingertips with, this 120 lens and the XF and IQ4. I mean, really is fascinating.
So what have we learned? Balancing the line between fine art photography and documenting three-dimensional engraved gems is difficult, but well worth the investment.
So as discussed today, our challenge for this reinstallation project for the digital labels was threefold. As we talked about the visual experience, to enhance the visual experience and uphold the 3 C's that we spoke of. That would be communication, collaboration, and continuity with our fellow colleagues. And then most of all, reimagining our lighting.
Of course, the Getty's updated style of photographing these gems is one way of lighting these tiny treasures. There's a lot of subjectivity in this practice. And as our colleague Kevin Canlin coined during our last presentation, there is no one size fits all when it comes to lighting. However, we found that taking the time and approaching our lighting on a fine art level caters to the needs across multiple departments with beautiful results. For us, our reimagined lighting style had a colossal impact on the visual experience for our audience and continues our quest to tell the stories behind these cultural heritage treasures.
So with that, thank you so much for listening today. And always remember, the greatest art in the world is the art of storytelling.